discuss what could be done to combat the crisis, I'm now joined by former police officer Peter Kirkham and youth anti-violence activist Paul McKenzie. Thank you both for joining us. Peter, first of all, £1 billion is now going to be allocated to the police. Surely that's enough to solve the problem?
I think we need to look at what that £1 billion is, where it's coming from and what it's going to. They've done this for quite some time now, mixed up a variety of different things and put a global figure on it. It's not £1 billion to get however many more cops on a permanent basis. Some of it is going to be able to be available for that, but some of it's going to counter-terrorism, and some of it's going to project stuff, and some of it's going to investment, and a lot of it is just the PCCs being allowed to raise it from council tax, and people pay twice for policing.
Will we see more bobbies on the beat? Will that solve the problem?
Hopefully. Yes, that's part of the problem. I mean, there's two aspects of the problem. Putting out the fire and stopping people killing each other like now, and then stopping them in the longer term with all the public health approach stuff.
Right.
Both of those need money.
OK, so Paul, we really do need to support the police in tackling this crisis, but the underlying problems should be addressed as well. What do you see those?
Absolutely. I mean, I agree with there's a national emergency at the moment. It's become more of an emergency now, and I'm going from the voices in my community, now that there are different types of people becoming victims of knife and gun crime. And so, yeah, I completely agree it's a national emergency. I agree with that. We need to look down the health route. I've been saying that for years, because I think that it's not just a problem with young people. I think it's a problem with violence as a whole in society. And so I think it's a health issue as opposed to a young person issue.
Yeah, but we certainly need to tackle it right now. Longer prison sentences for those who are found carrying knives, and also more stop and search.
I think with the whole stop and search thing, there's the issue of trust. I think a lot of people welcome stop and search in the communities that I work in. It's just the way it's done. It's always the same issue. We welcome stop and search, especially the parents, but it's the way it's done, and it's the young people that are targeted. And that's really the issue around it. I have no issue with stop and search over death, because I completely agree, there's too much violence on the streets nowadays. I do have an issue sometimes with the stories of how stop and search is
stop and search is being misused by many officers, Peter.
I wouldn't say it's being misused, but there are good and bad stop and searches. There are good and bad officers at doing it.
Yeah, I agree.
We've got a problem now that for 8 years, because of Mrs May again, cops have been beaten up into not doing stop and search. So we've got a police force that's not used to doing stop and search, because most officers on the street are less than in service.
As we've heard from Paul, confidence in the police force has been undermined. And
trust and confidence is important, but we can't create that overnight. That's something that builds over time. So I think the community, if they want to be protected, and bearing in mind it's the same demographic that are perpetrators, young males in inner city areas, that are the perpetrators.
Is that a fact?
Yeah, it is. It's young males. The street crime bit of it, there's other stabbings and there's other knife crime, but the bit that's exploding is on the street, and it's associated with street crime, gangs, street drug dealing. It's in that part of the business, if you like, that it's exploding. And it's the same demographic. You only have to look at the newspaper reports.
Paul, do you agree with that? You were questioning Peter?
No, I don't. I'm sorry, I don't agree with that. I mean, I do agree that in some part there, it's a portion to crime and young people on the street, and also gangs. We didn't mention gangs. You didn't mention gangs. However, if you look at the statistics for the violence on the streets last year alone, and those murders on the streets, it gives you a completely different picture. Yes, we have murders on the streets, but we have to be correct in how we address this. Most young people go out nowadays, believe they're going to be murdered because of what it said in the media. The media has painted this picture.
Who are they scared of?
Who are they scared of?
Young people.
Well, young people are now scared of young people, because now every time you turn on the television, there's an incident happening with somebody.
That's exactly my point. It's the same demographic. And so
it's not the same demographic.
You've just said it is. It's young males.
Well, but let's look at teenagers. Then let's look at teenagers who have actually been murdered on the streets of London in terms of overall figures of violence. It's a completely different picture. However, like I said in the beginning of this interview, it's now a national emergency, and this is coming from the mouths of the young people that I've worked with this week. It's now become a national emergency, and yes, they do feel slightly safer now with this title, but it's only become this because now the images that they're seeing of knife and gun crime are of young girls who sat in a park. And, you know, I take my hat
All
off.
right,
My heart
okay,
goes
Paul,
out
can
to
we just
the
shift the
family
focus maybe
when it
not
changes.
from youngsters, but what about parents' responsibility?
I think parents are trying as hard as they can. I work with, at present, 6 different families who are reasonably good families who are having issues with their children. So there is definitely an issue with parents and children, but they are trying. And so this picture of parents being responsible for it, they can't be responsible. Most of these young people that are involved in these crimes, they live a completely different life outside of the house.
Okay, Peter.
Again, we're back to the same demographic again, but parents have had enough. There's a group that are taking action on the 17th of April in central London, Operation Shutdown. It's a consortium of
I'm actually there with them.
It's a consortium of bereaved families and mums and whatever, and they've had enough. And one of the main things
I'm actually there on the 17th with them.
Right.
Excellent. Hopefully, I will be.
So what's the aim? What do they want then?
They've got a list of things that they want, individual aspects, and they all have got some validity. But the overall one is the government need to get a grip. They need to coordinate it, and they're calling for a COBR to be...
COBR, which
meeting.
is the emergency...
The Cabinet Office briefing room. It's for national emergencies, and it's where somebody...
And bring in the army, we're hearing from Gavin Williamson.
Yeah, that's Gavin Williamson playing political games, I'm afraid.
Martial law?
But the bottom line is the police have got very limited capacity. So, you know, there's all sorts of things that might need to be done. But it needs to be coordinated.
But we keep hearing about how limited the police capacity is. We keep hearing about that. And I don't know how connected or how often you go into these communities that, I mean, I work in them every single day. And their contact of the police or their mistrust of the police is that they just believe the police are targeting them.
Okay, Paul, briefly then, with your work,
yeah.
What do you do to build the bridges between the police and youngsters and communities?
Well, for example, I'm working quite closely in the Dagenham area in the next month. And that is all about actually going into schools with police officers to actually bridge that gap, because I firmly believe it's a trust issue with the police and communities.
Okay, thank you very much. Peter, final comment from you, please.
Absolutely it is, and people like Paul who are doing fantastic work, and there's dozens of them, all doing their own thing, usually quite small scale, trying to get funding for it or struggling with no funding, doing things fairly locally. They need to be supported, but they've got a really important role as an interpreter, if you like, between police and young people, because young people will not take don't carry a knife messages from police and people like me.
Thank you both very much indeed. Peter Kirkham and Paul McKenzie, thank you very much, both of you, for your time tonight to discuss this terrible situation that the country's facing at the moment. Still to come.